one reason or one important thing to me is to show people or listeners positive changes and positive ways to deal with the whole situation that we're in. And you said it already, you are a very curious person and you're
Uh-huh.
always into learning. You always, I mean, I can't remember one evening or day that we spent together where we didn't talk about many different subjects. And
Yes.
I would like to know, with, how did you discover gardening?
Well, by buying a little house with a garden. As soon as we got here, first thing I did was, check out the garden and just make it reasonably clean because it's all they put loads of patio that you use to drive on, drive, not garden patio, but actual these tiny little bricks, loads of them. So I dug up one side, see what was underneath, and there's a layer of sand, quite a lot of sand. So I dug all of that up, and then underneath that was a layer of plastic. Oh, what's that? Dug that up, and underneath that was hardcore rubble, building rubble. Like just broken bits of concrete.
Yeah,
Dug that up, and I found some earth,
a
but it was
treasure.
finally got some of God's earth. So, but it was very sterile. There was no worms, nothing. So I thought, well, I can't just put a tomato plant in that. There's no way. And plus, I don't know how toxic the, you know, materials were. So I let it breathe, and I started finding worms. I kept throwing them in. I got bought some dirt, and then I planted a few things just to help, get some more life back into the soil, and watched what was happening over that season. That was last year. And so I've got two climbers in there, which is lovely. A clematis, and I can't remember what the other one is. A honeysuckle, and I've got some pansies growing. They've come up nicely. They're beautiful. They're purple. I've got some heather, which is a kind of red coloured um, uh, finish on the leaves, and what else? Yeah, just a few things. So and I've planted some garlic
Vegetables?
bulbs. No, I've just planted some garlic bulbs for now, just because they're natural pesticides. So onion and garlic is good to keep away pests if you don't want to use anything, chemical. Um, so yeah, and the other side of the garden, oh, I bought a wormery. So I've got my little recycling my vegetation, and I was going to put that in, right. I dug up the right side to do the same as I did on the left,
Yeah.
um, and I kind of got to a certain depth, and I was like, "What is this?" Hit my shovel hitting this really hard material. Started to clear it away, and realised there was concrete underneath all of that I've just described: brick, and then sand, then plastic, then hardcore. Underneath that is concrete. And I was so upset because I just had this whole vision about getting my wormery in all through the winter, having it all there and scraping my scraps into it and then having nice soil kind of appearing. Nope, I've got to get through this. So I've actually got to a point now where I've cleared about a third of the garden with these mussels. I've
Oh,
been
wow.
doing it all myself, and some friends popped round the other day and they lifted out about 30 bags for me of hardcore labouring kind of levels. It's 50k bags of soil and stuff. They're very heavy.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm feeling quite, quite. What did
It,
my
it, it,
kids call me? Hench.
it sounds a little bit like more like construction work than gardening at the moment.
That bit is, yeah. Oh, honestly, but I'm seeing progress. I'm feeling fitter. I'm getting out in the garden every day, do some digging, and it's my little hobby. So I'm really pleased to have it because, one of the things that musicians are lucky enough to have. I mean, I'm very much invested right now in the spiritual community of reading and taking in a lot of information that I didn't really know about before, following various authors and all of that. And I realised something. I've been doing this for now about a year, and I realised something beautiful, which is that as musicians, we are already spiritually connected to our instruments, as spiritual people would describe meditating and other things. We as musicians do this naturally because of the nature of making music, and it's partly that tunnel vision thing, which isn't so much about achieving anything or doing anything, but the ability as musicians, when we play our instruments, to switch off the little voices, other perspectives and distractions, and do one thing really in a dedicated fashion. And to get good at your instrument, you have to learn how to practice properly, and that is to focus in on what you're doing and the repetition of it. I mean, a lot of spiritual practices involve chanting or rubbing stones, or listening to repetitive noises like trickling water or beads or whatever, chimes. But as musicians, we actually have this connection, and we have trained that part of our brain to learn how to naturally meditate when we play, which is an amazing thing. It's a very healing thing for us all. And I think that's one of the things that's helped me as a musician through lockdown, is I don't meditate, you see. I'm not really that interested in it. If I need to switch off my brain, as in terms of the distractions and the chattering and the inner critic or whatever, I just pick up my bass. I just play for an hour with no aim, no practice of a thing. I mean, just pick it up and just play music on it, not practicing anything that I'm trying to achieve. And using my instrument as a meditative tool has meant that I haven't had to continually live in the present of what's been going on with the fear narrative in our societies around sickness and death. Because although I have no fear of death whatsoever, injury, sure, I don't want to get injured. Anyone's going to be like, I might hurt my leg, right? That's not fear of death. That's just like, doesn't want to be in pain, right? That's a different thing. I'm not afraid of an ending, because I don't see death as an ending. It's just a change of something, and I don't believe I'm going to have, my consciousness will remain. I don't think I'm going to be reborn. I don't believe in reincarnation particularly. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe I do. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But what I do know is that I don't fear death. So when I'm surrounded by other people's trauma, their stress and their fear, that can be overwhelming. It's not my fear of death that's overwhelming, it's their fear of death that's overwhelming. So I've actually managed to use my instrument as a way of staying clear of that kind of atmosphere of fear and fear of death that's around very strongly at the moment. Because even if you don't have any real fear of these things, if you're at all sensitive, as most musicians I know are very sensitive, you can't help but be affected and infected by that. And I don't want that to be my reality when it's been given to me by somebody else. It's not how I live. I don't live that way. I live in an optimistic world, and in a world of pleasure and joy and love. And I've been feeling the tendrils of fear creeping in from friends who need support, and I'm available for them, from media, from announcements of projected deaths of this and this, and all this stuff. And to keep it at bay, I've gone in my garden, lucky enough to have access to that, focusing on, digging up concrete, which focuses the mind, I can tell you now. And importantly, using my instrument as a portal to connecting myself with beauty and switching off what other people are terrified by. And whilst doing that, sometimes making some good music too, as in, that's a bass line, that's a thing, I'm going to use that. And so creativity has come from it as well. So it's helped me in 3 separate ways. And I just feel really fortunate to be a musician through this time. There's been a narrative also from within our community as musicians of feeling underappreciated and not respected for what we contribute to society, because it's not perceived as essential. In the UK, we had our Chancellor, so our money guy, talking about retraining. If what you do is not needed or wanted, necessary for life, then maybe you should think about doing something more useful with yourself retrain to be a delivery driver, I presume, is the idea, something like that, which is perceived as more necessary right now. And I think that's affected a lot of people's self-esteem. They've dedicated their lives for decades doing something, whether it's as a musician or a technician to support the music industry. And while that has gone on, that conversation, that opinion has been sort of proliferated, spread amongst people, thinking that musicians and artists are unnecessary. The lockdown has only really been successful in terms of nobody really dissenting. People haven't been out on the streets protesting about lockdown particularly, only occasional little spurts, but most people have been very compliant. And the way that the government and etc. have made us compliant is by using artists' work to keep us entertained. And at the same time, now I haven't got a comment about that. I don't think that we're complicit in that and it's our fault, but that is one of the ways in which people have behaved themselves, by being locked into their computers watching various forms of entertainment that we have provided as artists and creative people. At the same time, we've been told that we're non-essential. So this strange, weird life that we've been told, well, we've been lied to, confused. There's that cognitive dissonance thing. It's very distressing mentally for people to have blue told as red, red told as blue, up is down, down is up. It's distressing, and I think that that's one of the ways in which I've stayed sane, is by switching a lot of that off and switching into what I do. And what I do doesn't require an audience. What I do is I play bass. I play bass alone in my room and get as much joy from my connection with my instrument. It's different. There's no audience there. I don't get that feedback from them. So it is a thing I appreciate and I miss. But in terms of playing my bass, it does what it's always done for me, which is it gives me joy. And I think if musicians focus in more on that and less about whether people like it or can hear it or see them, then hopefully it can serve to help them too. Because I don't need anybody to tell me the importance of what I've decided to do with my life is. I don't need anybody to define it, and I don't need anyone to put a rating on it. And certainly not somebody who sits behind a desk and talks bullshit from a pulpit. That he won't have that position in 3 or 4 years, and he'll be working as a CEO somewhere or on some board, earning a shitload of money, completely disconnected from what makes life beautiful. But what I do every single day, I pick up my instrument, and that is a direct connection with what makes life beautiful. And I know what makes life beautiful, and I don't need our chancellor to tell me what that is.
I mean, you're saying something. I think, and I talked about this with another guy already. The fact that musicians pick a job, so to speak, that they really love doing, and it's not the 2 hours 90 minutes shows that we're on stage. That's
No.
one part of it.
Yes.
Like you said, being with your instrument, no matter what it is, playing away, finding new notes, new melodies, new riffs. That's our first success, and we share it with only ourselves. But
Yeah.
we go mad when you know that when we find that killer bass line, go, wow,
Yeah.
we are so excited, like we would have made a number one hit, and then we take the next step, and then we find other fellow musicians that think that's a cool bass line, and we make a song out of it. And then there's the next level of success that we share with the musicians. It's all far from audience. And then we record it, and then we listen back to the mix, and we go, wow, it turned out to be that song that we heard in our mind. And
Yes.
we're crazy about it. We still haven't made a cent out of it or any money.
Yeah.
We're just happy, and we feel kind of successful because we went down that path. And then comes the next levels where we hopefully we wouldn't release records if we wouldn't want to sell them. So
Hmm.
anyway, and all these enthusiasm and most of all love to what we do, kind of in this situation where we're in, um, is a I don't know if that's the English, if that's the correct expression. It's a kickback because people envy us to a certain
Mm.
extent because in my opinion, at least 70% of the people pick the job that they don't like or even hate, but just to
Mm.
make money, they picked the
Hmm.
job and didn't
Hmm.
really look for the fire inside of them, whatever they burn for.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to be an instrument. It could be being a doctor, being a tailor, a cook, whatever. If you do it with your heart and you love what you're doing. I have a house too, and I have a garden, and I'm not into so much into flowers and things. I'm more into vegetables and organic food. And I noticed the other thing that you said when I'm planting and then later on harvesting and thing, it really connects me with nature
Mm.
to a certain extent, to really dig in the earth where
Mm.
we all come from and where we all
Mm.
go back to,
Yeah.
and the whole um, feeling of being part of the nature. And this
Mm.
is one, because this is also one thing that I think people realize through this pandemic thing, is that we're just a tiny part of this planet, and the planet doesn't need us, but we need the planet. And you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I do. I have a different theory about this now. I mean, I think that I'm hearing a lot about people, especially in the environmental world, about humans being superfluous and extra, and the planet doesn't need us. And I think that if we see the planet as a closed loop mechanism, then everything within it is essential for its life. For instance, okay, here's one thing: Brazilian Amazon. Mm?
Let me It's wrong to say that the planet doesn't need us. We are part of the planet, but we behave like we're the master of the planet, and we do things to the planet um, without a long-term thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, yeah, it's an obvious thing that I would know that you already appreciate. But my idea about this is like even more kind of radical, really. It's more that I don't even know if this is the right conversation for this element of what I think. It's maybe a little woo woo for people, but it is
Mm.
that everything that we do is part of the story, including the plastic pollution, the destruction, is forcing change. So polarization, okay, people who are extremely for something, and then the opposite side of those people who are extremely against that thing. That creates conversation because when things are in balance, there's no disagreement, right? There's just life. I like when things are in balance. Things go out of balance when something needs to change. And we're in a situation where we were in before COVID and all of the lockdowns, or the breakdown, I should say, where things needed to change. And I feel that that change is more likely with an awareness of an extreme. So, our extreme human behaviour that's negative to the planet needed to be highlighted. I think this has been an opportunity for us to actually see in more stark relief that our relationship with the planet is out of balance.
Yes.
And the fact that more of us have been able to spend time in our gardens, just to bring it away from the lofty and back to down to earth stuff. Spending more time in our gardens has given us more of a connection with, like you say, a direct connection with dirt, with earth, which is, people assume that they already feel this connection, It's only once your hands are dirty and you're pulling things out of the ground that you're using in your kitchen and eating that you grew yourself potentially, that you get a real sense of how beautiful it actually is where we come from. So the gardening side of things is a beautiful reminder that we need to do that after things kind of go back to normal. We need to remember to get our hands dirty, to touch the soil. I haven't used any hand sanitizer ever, and I haven't during COVID. I wash my hands. I've always washed my hands, but I don't use things that kill the bacteria on my hands. But I will eat an apple off a tree, without scrubbing it first. If I know where it's come from, if I've picked the fruit myself, if give it a rub to get the dust off it, the sort of localized pollution. But I haven't really ever been worried about bacteria and viruses and germs, and I'm not going to start now. And actually, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, just that this period through all of the sickness that we've been experiencing has given me a chance to educate myself more about what's happening with natural relationships with bacteria and viruses, and I feel more educated now about systems, our system, and how it functions and what relationship we have with viruses, etc. And I feel so much more confident now about myself moving through the world with as little intervention as possible from humankind, because we're young, relatively young as a species compared to the systems that have existed in the past. And the more I discover about those things, the more I see our technologies in relationship with natural systems to help us, advance us by short. But of course, I'm a great fan of technologies, but I'm not a fan of technologies in exchange of what has occurred naturally and has worked in the past. I think that if we stay in relationship with what worked in the past and add our knowledge, which comes from natural, comes from the earth, because we come from the earth, so what we think of comes from the earth. But what we shouldn't do is replace everything that did work with our technologies. Everything should be in balance, and our relationships should be in balance. So yeah, I'll accept advice about exercise, but I'll also remember what my grandma said about soil and about her levels of hygiene, because she lived into her 90s, and I see that today's elderly aren't doing so great. By the age of 70, a lot of them are not doing so great at all. Care homes and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other issues. So what we've been doing for the last 70 years or so hasn't actually given us a better outcome for life. We might live longer, but we live pickled, sat in chairs, in care homes. That's not life, and that's not living. So I'm listening to my grandma more so than, the doctors of today. But I will accept technologies to help me. But I still think, get your hands dirty, go out in the garden, get filthy.
Do you have that actual saying when it comes to kids playing in the mud, a little dirt doesn't hurt, or did I make that up myself?
It's the sentiment exists. I can't remember if there's a specific saying in our culture, but yeah, definitely.
It brings me to my last question. You being curious, what is the most surprising finding about yourself through the experiences of the past 12 months? What did you find out about yourself you didn't know before that?
That's a massive, massive thing. I can't answer that easily except to say it just opens up a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so let's just go here. The biggest thing or surprising thing, or what's the word I'd use? Revealing. The most revealing and poetic, beautiful. I don't know how to describe it, but this is what I've discovered in the last 12 months. I've discovered my pathway retrospectively, looking backwards. By looking backwards, I've discovered my pathway to who I am today. In every, I can't say in every single area, because I don't know what there's left to discover, and I assume there's more because I discovered so much that I didn't know, that I don't know what I don't know, right? So let's assume that I haven't discovered everything. But I have managed to trace pathways of behaviors, outcomes to today. It's like okay, so I see myself now as somebody who can sit in her own web of life, and I can see all of the strands now, and I can see all the connections, like I say, maybe not every single one, and I'm sort of more aware of the poetry of my life now, how I got here, literally, to this thought process, to my life experiences, my career path, my relationships with others, my ability to have the level of resilience that I have, which I have a huge amount of strength to face adversity, and how that has come. I kind of had space. I think that's 2020 gave me the space to just take some time to do some just to do some thinking and some introspection, looking within, and it's been an amazing story. And because of this, I'm writing a book. Where am I now? I think I'm at 80, just short of 90,000 words I've written so far. It's almost finished, in other words. Yeah, I'm nearly finished. I'm not going to write a huge amount more. I've got 2 more chapters to do. That's it. And I got stuck at about 2015 right now in my book. So there's a massive amount to write. But I'm not going to write too much about that, because it's my very, very personal stuff in this next bit, and I'm going to just only put a little bit of that in. All the other stuff is to do with my career as a musician, stuff, anecdotal stories. But because I've had this space, I've been able to see more clearly who I am. And one of the best things, if not the best thing, about that knowledge I have now is that I'm really happy with myself. I'm really comfortable in my own skin now. And I like where I am because I understand it. I can forgive things that I might have judged myself for in the past, or I accept things that I might have wanted to change. I've become very, very, very comfortable in my skin because of my awareness of the pathways that took me here. I couldn't be any other way. So I've had to, I think the most beautiful thing about it is just to feel really at peace. And that's what it's given me this 2020.
I'm glad to hear that. And talking to you and seeing you smile like the sun, as you always do,
Yeah.
is so feels so good and gives me such pleasure and energy, and knowing yeah, you are out there smiling the day away. This is really, really beautiful to hear. I kind of experienced a bit of the same, to be honest. Yes, I mean, my career, I had some huge ups and downs, and 2020 gave me the time to, like you said, look back on a lot of paths that led me to where I am, and I had quite some years where I was almost out of business and I had to do other things. But I noticed it what changed my life drastically was the birth of my first my son, and then of my daughter. And I jumped without really making a conscious decision. I jumped into fatherhood, and I did everything possible when they were babies and when they were kids. And the good thing, looking back, because and I stopped, socializing, going to, getting the contacts of the right people and going to the right jam sessions. I kind of, yeah, preferred to go and see my boys' soccer game, and
Yeah.
rather than hanging out with the next producer. But the main effect, and what I'm really really happy about, is I got to spend all of their early days together, and we have such a strong connection that, especially in this last year, was the foundation to get through all this madness, because they knew they can trust me.
Yeah.
And so it was all worth the way that I had to go and where I am. And I'm not happy with the situation of the
No.
planet and the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
but I am happy with who I am, and where I am, and with whom, so to speak. So, and we try to stay, we try to stay focused, and we try to stay positive, and love and laugh and joy and
Yeah.
freedom and happiness, and therefore be a role model. So if possible, for whoever looks at us and say,
Hmm.
oh, they're happy, they're smiling,
Yes.
they're loving, they're caring.
It's
Dear
true.
Yolanda, it
Yes.
was my favorite Corona call so far, to be very honest,
You say that
because
to all the girls on both.
yeah, because no, really, because we haven't seen in such a long time. So
No.
please, let's pray to reconnect in person, with including hugging and kissing, and yeah, that's about it.
Listen, I will hug you,
Yeah, I'll
okay?
hug you. I will hug you
Because
anyway.
because I lived my life according to my own understanding about how the world works. I'm afraid, despite whatever any government may say, um, I have to do that for my sanity. I can't just blindly follow rules that I don't agree with,
Yeah.
um, and that's just how it is. Until they outlaw hugging to the point where you will be imprisoned for it, I will always give a hug to anyone that wants one, whether it was last March in 2020 or whether it's now, because I that's how I live. And if anybody wants to judge me for that, they're entitled to. If you don't want a hug, I wouldn't force it upon you. But it's here for those that wish to have it. A hug is available.
I don't do it because I hated these I don't know how they call it in English, the distant hug. I don't do that.
What
Uh,
is that? I don't know what that is.
no, they on TV and stuff, they
Hmm.
do, we do the they don't actually hug each other. They just hold their hands out and say, let's do
Right. Oh, I see. Okay, I ain't
the
seen that one. Yeah.
distant hug. I mean, what
Right.
the fuck?
Okay.
What the fuck are you talking about? It's not a
No.
hug if you don't hug. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we need to arrange a way to get
So
in physical
yes,
hugging distance as soon
that's
as
right.
possible. Thank
Hmm.
you so much for your time talking to
Welcome.
me, and all the best for the future. Say hi to the kids, and yeah, talk
And
soon.
to you, Umber. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to speak with you.
You're welcome. Thanks. So, und das war der zweite Teil des Director's Cuts meines Corona Calls mit Yolanda Charles. Unwiderstehlich, dieses Lächeln, oder? Und ja, ganz, ganz tolle Musikerin. Ich hoffe, es hat euch so viel Spaß gemacht wie mir, und es gibt demnächst einen neuen Corona Call hier auf meinem YouTube-Kanal, den ihr gerne abonnieren könnt, wo ihr die Glocke läutet. Ihr wisst, wie das funktioniert, besser als ich. Und ihr könnt mir einen Kommentar hinterlassen. In diesem Sinne, danke fürs Zuhören und Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Bleibt wachsam und gesund.
Bow, 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 bow.